back, everyone. For those of you who are in the previous session, I'm with you here again. So you're in for round 2 of a training session. This session is focused on NFTs. Obviously, everyone has heard the NFT. We'll try and unpick that a little bit, get into some use cases, and then look at potential illicit uses of NFTs. However, before we get started here, I just want to sort of give everyone a sense of what range of familiarity we're shooting for. This is geared more towards folks who are maybe newer to NFTs or have not really done a lot of NFT investigations or examined NFTs in general. So hopefully this session is informative and useful for you all. But without further ado, I will turn it over to my colleague to walk us through some of the fundamentals of NFTs here. Oh, sorry. And we should have done intros, but yeah, I'm Adam. That's Anand. Got Philip over here. We'll be with you today.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, y'all. So what are NFTs? That's the topic for today, right? Let's break it down. Let's talk about the token, the T in the NFT. Like, it's representing something. It could be a token of appreciation. It could be an arcade token that you exchange for goodies there at the arcade. Let's take an example of a movie ticket. I go buy a movie ticket, exchange that, and watch a movie of my choice. I could buy a bunch of store vouchers and then use that to buy goods that match the value of those vouchers, if you will. So digital tokens are very similar, right? We can go and exchange some fiat currency and exchange that for, it could be a Bitcoin, Ether, Litecoin, any of those cryptocurrencies. And then when we start talking about those cryptocurrencies themselves, thank you. When we start talking about the cryptocurrencies themselves, each of them have their own key features. Like say Ether, which is the native currency of the Ethereum blockchain, allows you to create or initialize smart contracts. You can code smart contracts to do a lot of different functionality. Like, you can build out functionalities that can get executed on those smart contracts when they're executed. Ethereum blockchain also allows you to create smart contracts which will allow you to build out digital assets, different digital assets. And these digital assets are called tokens. So people tokenize a lot of different things. It could be currency that you'd tokenize, like the typical fiat currency that you can tokenize. You can tokenize a lot of real-world assets. We'll talk a lot about the real-world assets and real-world use cases very soon. Philip's going to cover that very soon there. So now that we talked a little bit about the token, let's talk about the fungibility, the F in the NFT. So let's talk about fungible assets. Now you talk about interchangeable units or things that are not really, uniqueness is not the key characteristic, but the value and the amount is more of the driver in a fungible asset. Like example for that is the US dollars, for example, where I have a US dollar and the value of US dollar to be used freely and not worry about this particular US dollar or that particular US dollar allows me to use US dollars in a fungible way. And similarly, you can talk about other commodities, like it could be soybeans or gold, where each of those units of measure is what matters and not the individual pieces of those assets. But when we switch to the non-fungible side of the world, we talk about uniqueness, right? Uniqueness and non-interchangeability, like where we'll say Mona Lisa, for example, right? There's only one original Mona Lisa, but that has all of the value, but copies don't have the same status, same value as the original Mona Lisa. Talk about vintage cars, for example. The scarcity or the limited quantity of those vintage cars adds to the value of those cars, right? So now you're talking about things that are not exchangeable or not interchangeable. And that's what is non-fungible in this world. So with those two definitions, an NFT, or a non-fungible token, is defined as a unique identifier that cannot be copied, that's not interchangeable, and that can be recorded on the blockchain to verify its authenticity and ownership. So a good example for a non-fungible token project is CryptoKitties, where CryptoKitties was a gaming project which was introduced where people can purchase, collect, breed, and sell virtual cats. So with that example, let's switch over to another example of ownership. We talked about ownership, certifiable ownership, authenticated ownership. So another example is a lot of us are familiar with sports cards, like basketball, football, baseball cards that were used as trading cards, growing up. And back in the days when you had the trading cards, how could you define ownership? I could define ownership if I physically have access to that card. So we had to come up with enclosures, fancy enclosures that I've seen people use to make sure that you have physical control over those cards. But then when you flip the coin towards NFTs, the ownership information is embedded in the blockchain, which makes it easily certifiable, or you can verify the ownership on that particular NFT. So that hopefully explains to you the comparison between ownership of a physical asset versus a digital asset. So how do NFTs work? So let's talk a little bit about the key properties of an NFT, right? NFTs can be minted, and they have unique identifiers. They're not interchangeable. We already talked about it. Information is easily verifiable on the blockchain. It's embedded in the blockchain and easily verifiable. We talked about that as well. And they live on a blockchain like Ethereum or Flow or other blockchains which are specially made for NFTs, or NFT, like you have a lot of NFT projects on those blockchains. And then let's look at this from two different perspectives: an owner of the NFT and the creator of the NFT. As an owner, you can prove you're the owner. You can make sure that information is not manipulated, because all the information on the blockchain is immutable, which means that no one can alter the data there. And then you can sell the NFT. A lot of the times when you sell the NFT, the creator probably gets a royalty as well. So based on how the project is set up, potentially the creator gets some royalties. And another scenario is you keep the asset for yourself forever. Like I have friends who have, I was just talking to my friend of mine who has the Joe Montana rookie card, and he's like, I'm not going to give this to anyone because this is a key collection of his. Then we'll flip to the other side where we're talking about the creator. So as a creator, you can prove who created that, because that information, that metadata is embedded in the blockchain. And then a lot of the times, as a creator, you define the scarcity. Like, how many of these tokens am I going to print, right? Like in the sports cards scenario, there were only limited number of rookie cards for all these big players that were created. So scarcity is something that's defined by the creator. And then the creator typically gets royalties every time the NFTs are sold in any marketplace. Like it could be Rarible, OpenSea, or even sent peer-to-peer. So now that we talked about how typical NFTs work, let's take an example of an ecosystem that's focused on gaming and collectibles. What are the key components of the ecosystem itself? We need a marketplace where you're storing those NFTs, you're able to trade those NFTs. Typical examples are Rarible, Nifty, OpenSea, and a bunch of others, right? And then from an infrastructure perspective, you need a blockchain. You need the services of the you need services that can be used to interact with the blockchain. You need a place to store your physical file, like the filing system. And then you need a wallet software to make sure that you are able to authenticate that it is you, and you're able to sell and buy things. And the last part, when we talk about an ecosystem that's focused on gaming and collectibles, typically these are blockchain-enabled games, right? when you talk about blockchain-enabled games, most of them are decentralized apps, DApps as we call them, which allows you to enhance some key properties for, like, let's say a warrior gets more armory, or a player gets more features in the game, and you add those features as collectibles or NFTs, and the player who is playing the game gets to pay the money or the currency to get those collectibles added to the collection. So anyways, now that we have talked a little bit about what are NFTs, how NFTs work at a high level, I'm going to hand it off to my friend Philip, who's going to talk about some real-world examples of NFTs.
Thanks, Anand. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Philip Silitschanu. I am the research director at IDC covering blockchain, crypto, NFTs, and now Web3. So we're going to get back to this slide in a few minutes because, as you can see, there's a lot to cover. We're definitely not going to cover all of this because this would be a whole other conference just covering this. But I put this up because I want us to all see that we're at basically the tipping point for blockchain and NFTs. My belief and IDC's belief is that basically NFTs are sort of the killer app for blockchain. The same way that in 1994, 95, everyone was still sort of fumbling around the internet using file transfer protocol and typing in IP addresses and doing BBS boards to download pictures and JPEGs, and then all of a sudden Netscape Navigator came out and the World Wide Web just blew up. So what we have today, we're at that tipping point, right? And NFTs are sort of the killer app that make the underlying blockchain technology more accessible and more usable to the general public. Before I get into that, though, I want to touch upon what Anand said and also kind of rebut a lot of the arguments that a lot of our clients, a lot of our users sometimes hear about NFTs that, like, oh, well, it's, basically I can have a digital copy of a picture, right? I can have a Bored Ape picture and I can just right-click on it or do a screenshot and I can have the same picture. Yeah, you can have a copy of a Bored Ape if you don't buy it, but what's critical is that you just have a copy. I can go to Paris, take a picture of the Mona Lisa, right? Go home, print it, maybe tweak the image a little bit, make it more to my liking, but all I really have is just a copy of the Mona Lisa. If I invited all of you over and said, oh, look at my beautiful Mona Lisa, you'd say, you're nuts, that's just a copy, right? You can have a copy, a screenshot of an NFT, of a piece of digital art. It doesn't mean you own the original. And what's critical about NFTs is that it is a proof of one of a kind, right? There's only one particular version of this piece of digital art, this intellectual property, this content, this beautiful cat picture, right? Another example. Oh, it's digital. What's so big? What's the big deal? It's digital. Digital has no value. It's intangible. If I may argue, IBM, very historic company, very famous name. Anywhere around the world, people know what IBM is. IBM.com, the IP address, right? If I went to IBM and said, listen, I want to buy that domain name, do you think they would sell it to me? I could offer them, Elon Musk money, and they'd probably tell me, no, thank you. But I would say, well, it's digital, it's intangible. You can't physically hold IBM.com, right? It's basically, technically, just a couple of electrons, right, somewhere in memory, but it's nothing but intangible assets. But yet there's value. The same way, NFTs are digital, intangible assets, but they still hold value. They are still a store of value that can be exchanged. One last aspect of NFTs that are critical. Trust. At the end of the day, this all comes down to trust, right? And ownership and uniqueness. Let's say, hypothetically, if I had put up my used 2016 Aventador, it's outside, right? And I said, first person up here to write me a check or wire me some money, or I'll even take 1 Bitcoin, I'll give you all the discount, right? Gets the car. I got the keys in my briefcase, I got the service records, it's parked right outside, you can go take a look at it, you can take it for a test drive, do whatever you want. But read the fine print, it's really, really fine. I don't have the title for it. all of you would just tell me to, go pound sand. Be like, you're crazy. I'm not going to give you any money for a car you don't have the title for. Same thing with NFTs. NFTs provide ownership, and it's immutable ownership, and it's ownership that anyone can verify, right? Because it's distributed. No one can hack into my account theoretically, or the DMV, and change the ownership title. No one can hack into my bank account unless I give them my key, right? Or mistakenly, my private key, and change anything. An NFT guarantees absolute ownership. Digital art. So now we're moving away from some of the rebuttals I did into some of the use cases that we're seeing. And of course, everyone has seen the digital art, and art is subjective. It's neither here nor there, but what it proves is that the technology, the underlying technology of NFTs is robust enough. The security, the ownership rights are robust enough that people are willing to trust their money. Putting 6 million, 7 million, 5 million, depends which piece of art, digital art you want. They trust the underlying technology enough that they're willing to put their money there. Again, doesn't matter if it's art, if it's ownership title, anything. It's the technology that matters. But now let's move to physical art. There are companies out there already that are doing shares of fractional art ownership shares on NFTs, right? There's also companies that are already moving into using NFTs to verify authenticity, right? Where, for example, if some of you buy, the little gold bullion, 1 ounce, 1 gram, right? There's a company called pamp.com, which is an acronym for a Swiss gold company, where on your phone, you open up the app, you literally just scan that little piece of gold bullion, and the technology there can look at the little micro indentations on the piece of gold and verify that it's a legitimate serialized piece of gold bullion. We put that on an NFT. Now anyone can verify the ownership, and you no longer have to physically hold that piece of asset. All you have to do is hold the digital piece, the digital aspect of it. As Anand said, with baseball cards, football cards, right? God forbid his friend loses the football cards in a flood or fire, God forbid. The value is wiped out. If it's digital, the digital ownership, the digital value is there. Other place NFTs are going to come into play, music, right? You go buy a ticket for a concert, you're paying Ticketmaster fees. Why? Because you need to trust that the ticket you're getting is actually the ticket you're getting. You don't want to show up to the concert with your friends, and all of a sudden the bouncer at the door is telling you, like, this is garbage, this is a fake ticket. Music sharing, you can do mashups with, like Supreme and different music, right? Shoes, music, anything you can imagine is there. And there's this huge built up potential, and what's missing from it all this time has been the underlying technology to allow that. We're seeing this in fashion too, where you can buy a pair of shoes, you get the physical shoes, you get the NFT that matches it in the metaverse, which is a whole other area. You also get rewards. So let's say, I like Adidas, but I don't like soccer. And I get a bunch of points for buying Adidas. I get tickets to a World Cup match. I don't want to go, but I want to give them to a friend of mine. I can now exchange that ownership of those tickets. And my friend who maybe gets tickets to the US Open gives me tickets to a tennis match. Travel, sports, can completely revolutionize the airline ticketing industry, cruise industry, mileage. So now with miles, airline miles, everything can be an NFT, everything can be trusted, everything can be traded, and ownership can be verified. We're seeing this already in travel. We're seeing this, obviously, as we all know, in the NBA with video clips, right? Where you can basically buy a piece of digital content, digital information that has value because you are the owner. Last place we're going to see, or not the last place, but the last place I'll cover that we're really going to see a big change is in Web3. Right? The evolution to Web3 is something that's critical. It's something where we're going to move away from the sort of traditional siloed ownership of content. And content, I don't mean just pictures of my cat or songs or a TikTok video. Every time I click on a page, every time one of you click on a page, that is data. That is data that can be measured, that can be monetized. Currently, all that data is basically held by a few of the large corporations, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebook Metas of the world. But NFTs, if that data can be transformed and stored and equitably exchanged for value, it's revolutionary. Again, some of the enabling technology, and I'll go through this pretty quick: blockchain, crypto, DAOs, smart contracts, but this is going to move into AR and VR, into IoT, into analytics, especially analytics for security, and also cloud. Some of the industries that will be impacted immediately or are already seeing impact: gaming, banking, right? Distributed, decentralized finance, retail, healthcare, government. Again, I'll close on this because I know we need to move on, and Adam's going to come up, but we can go into this later during Q&A. So thank you all very much. Adam?
All right, thanks so much, Philip. And we just walked through quite a bit on potential use cases, legitimate use cases of NFTs, sort of what these NFTs are, but this wouldn't be a Chainalysis training course if we don't get a little bit more concrete here and take a look at what we can see on chain, what we can see in the data, and then specifically we'll focus on illicit use of NFTs. As with any new technology, we always preface here, any new technology can be used for good and it can be used for bad. We are going to focus here on sort of what we can see, what we can observe. But again, it's worth noting first that the vast majority of NFTs transactions are perfectly legitimate. That's sort of what we see in the data, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But we'll take a look actually first here at three broad typologies, three broad potential ways that NFTs could be used by illicit actors for various reasons. And the first one is one you've likely heard of, which is wash trading. What is wash trading? Well, it's not something unique to NFTs. It's essentially, we have one NFT and we have two accounts that are buying it, two different addresses. Maybe those addresses are controlled by the same entity, and what they're doing is trading that NFT back and forth between them. Why might they do that? Well, maybe they're doing it to create the appearance that that specific NFT has a lot of buyers and sellers. Maybe there's a lot of demand for that, and they're trying to simulate that demand for the NFT. Again, most sales of NFTs perfectly legitimate. However, we can look on the blockchain, and because all these NFTs are running on these open blockchain networks, because all that data is public, we can start to map it out. And that's exactly what we see here in the graph on Reactor behind us. We can see seller number one, financing, buyer number one, and they are exchanging an NFT on an NFT marketplace. All of that recorded on the blockchain, and we can sort of map out this pattern of activity. Now, it turns out we can actually go beyond just detecting, okay, these two accounts are related and they're trading an NFT back and forth between them. We can start to look for broader patterns with bigger picture analysis. We can look for patterns in the way different accounts interact with each other. Maybe we run a query looking at that data that's available publicly, and we say, show me examples where the buyer of an NFT was funded by the seller, where the buyer received Ether immediately before the sale and purchased from the seller. And we can start to build out patterns. We can look at interesting case studies. And here we have one that was featured in our crypto crime report, where we have in the center there, one entity. I believe in the center we actually have the NFT marketplace. But we've got one entity funding all these different addresses. And essentially, we're seeing a wash trading network. Now, we actually don't even have to stop there looking at the on-chain data. We can start to calculate things like profitability. And while this graph behind me looks very impressive, it looks like a very coordinated effort. Maybe the wash trader here was able to run up the price and convince people to buy NFTs at inflated values from them, making a profit in the course of their activity. What actually happened here is the trader lost money. They paid more in fees, in gas fees and fees to the NFT marketplaces than they made in profit from the inflated prices of NFTs, and we can see that all on chain. So wash trading, certainly a risk, but it's certainly something we can map out as well, looking at the on-chain data. What's another risk that we hear about all the time when it comes to NFTs? Again, NFTs have seen a rapid influx of value. We've seen billions and billions of dollars flow through NFT marketplaces over the past year. But we've also seen, with this new interest in broadly decentralized services writ large, things like DeFi platforms and NFT platforms, we've seen illicit actors take notice as well. we've seen an increasing share of illicit funds being sent to broadly sort of DeFi-related services, decentralized finance-related services. Now, when we break off, NFTs, and you could argue NFTs are not really, in the category of DeFi as well, but when we focus in on NFT platforms, we actually don't see that much value, illicit value, being sent to NFT platforms today. And the key word there is today, because the trend that we see is there is a rapid increase in the value being sent to these NFT platforms, the identified on-chain illicit value flowing into these various NFT marketplaces. And you can see that in the graph behind me. However, the absolute figure remains pretty small, $1.5 million. That's not a whole lot of money, especially in the context of how much volume is flowing through these NFT contracts and NFT platforms. If we look at the NFT contracts themselves, which generally we would think the value flowing there is related to minting NFTs, but we see over $40 billion sent to those NFT contracts, those NFT smart contracts in 2021. And so that absolutely dwarfs the value directly, the illicit value directly being sent to NFT marketplaces. And it also, the value sent to NFT marketplaces here pales in comparison to the total scale of crypto laundering. However, what we have to say here is, number one, our data is not necessarily capturing everything. NFTs could potentially be used for things like trade-based money laundering. The idea here is similar to art-based money laundering. I take an NFT, I claim I made a profit from selling an NFT, I can make a transaction that makes it look like I sold the NFT on chain, but really the source of my funds might be other illicit sources, maybe whatever it might be. And while it's certainly something we want to keep an eye on, and we've seen come up in the occasional case, if we look at NFT marketplaces, we do see that there is some exposure from these NFT marketplaces back to mixing services that could be indicative of some of that more trade-based money laundering, that potential to give the appearance that actors are gaining funds from selling NFTs, when in reality, again, the source of their funds might be some other illicit activity. However, in the data, again, it's not something we see all the time. Frankly, the biggest source of NFT-related crypto activity, and also the biggest risk for users that we see constantly, is theft. People are not accustomed to NFTs, and we see it all the time. We can go on Twitter, and simply if you search on Google, search on Twitter for NFT theft, you will see lots and lots of stories like this. Why is NFT theft such a prevalent trend? Well, as my colleagues just mentioned, NFTs are new. People are being brought into the space buying NFTs for the first time. Maybe buying an NFT is the first time that they've used a crypto wallet. Therefore, they might fall for what we would consider relatively straightforward scamming attempts or theft attempts. Maybe a victim is persuaded into giving their private keys to someone on the internet. Someone calls someone on their phone number after doing a little bit of research and convinces them that they're from MetaMask customer support. I need your private keys, please. And that's something we see all the time. People buy NFTs and then give their private keys to someone on the internet. And for those of you, who have used cryptocurrency self-custodial wallets before, you know that if you have private keys, you have control, and those illicit actors can then run off with those NFTs. However, it's not always that simple either. NFTs are smart contracts, and that means users might have to guard against certain risks that they don't even know exist. Things like approval attacks, where essentially people convince an NFT holder to approve that NFT for transfer, a common step that you basically have to do if you want to, say, sell it on a marketplace like OpenSea. They convince them to approve that NFT for transfer on their own address, essentially giving control of the NFT to the attacker. We see that all the time. Hackers make off with millions of dollars worth of NFTs simply by asking people to approve the NFT for transfer, or in some cases, they just convince them to click on the button using their self-custodial wallet, transferring the NFT directly to the attacker. All of these are ways that the attackers are conniving to separate the victim from their NFT, and because victims are new, because NFTs aren't well known, and because a lot of these users are new to the world of cryptocurrency, they can fall prey to these, again, relatively unsophisticated scams. However, because these actors are not necessarily pulling off super complex attacks and getting into very detailed exploits of DeFi protocols, because these are relatively simple scammers, we can oftentimes map out their activity on chain pretty easily. And a nice example that's been in the news a little bit recently here is the recent compromise of the Bored Ape Yacht Club Instagram account. Now, for those of you not familiar, the Bored Ape Yacht Club is one of the most popular NFT collections in the world. Lots of celebrities own it. It's in the news all the time. And naturally, these NFTs are worth a lot, which makes them a target for attackers. What did the attackers do here? Well, they didn't do anything too fancy. They didn't compromise something on the blockchain. They didn't, crack some, detailed protocol. What they did is they broke into the Bored Ape Yacht Club's Instagram account. They posted a link that said, hey, we're running a new mint. Click here. And what did people do? Well, they went to the site, they clicked on the link, and it turns out when they clicked that link and then clicked, the sign transaction button in their self-custodial wallet, they just transferred the NFT to the attacker. Couldn't be more simple of an attack, but again, people not aware of the risks, they fell for this attack, and the attacker made off with a whole lot of NFTs. However, what we can do, and what you're seeing in the graph behind me, is follow the funds. Now, Reactor is really nice for following the funds here, and we see the theft occur. There's a sale on OpenSea, or excuse me here, there's a sale on an NFT platform, actually not OpenSea, and then the funds move over to a variety of exchanges. And what we can do to really understand that, and what we talked about in the previous session as well, and what Jakob alluded to a little bit this morning, is we can even hone in on the transactions involving the NFTs. What I have behind me is just two of the particular Bored Apes that were stolen in this example. And we can see here 2 transactions, transferring the Bored Ape to the attacker. And then what does the attacker do immediately next? Well, they sell them. They sell them on the NFT marketplace, and then they start moving those funds to exchanges. A very simple attack, but this is something we see over and over and over, where victims fall prey to these relatively straightforward requests to essentially make off with their very valuable NFTs. And to the point on sort of consumer protection, what can we do to basically protect these users? How can we help them? Well, it turns out that another common trend we see in these NFT thefts is that these actors don't just do it once. If I am able to successfully scam someone out of an NFT, I'm probably going to keep trying to do that. I can go and repeat that with other victims, and we see that all the time. We see that if we start from a reported NFT theft, just as Jakob showed this morning, we can build out a more complete picture of what that attacker is doing. We can map out what other addresses they're using and find consolidation points, mapping out a picture of activity and say, okay, starting from our reported theft right here, we can see that, okay, it's sending funds off to these addresses here, and these other addresses are receiving funds from the NFT marketplace, receiving NFTs for no value. These are likely scammers or thieves as well, and they're likely all related because they're doing the same thing and sending the funds to the same points. So with that activity, ideally, you could move against these scammers or take actions as an NFT platform to potentially protect your users. But this is something that the industry is working on, and to the point of consumer protection alluded to earlier, something where I think the industry has a lot more strides to make. With that in mind, though, I know we only have 10 minutes now separating us from a nice happy hour, so I certainly don't want to keep anyone over time. And I'll go ahead and open the floor for questions. Feel free to ask us all about sort of general NFT trends, what we see in illicit activity, whatever is top of mind. And yeah.
Hi there. I'd just like to know how you classify wash trades when you identify them. And this is in the context of if you worked in a financial institution and you're working with financial instruments, the minute that activity takes place in the regulated sector, you'd have a regulatory breach. If a financial benefit is obtained, you'd then have a criminal offence as well as a regulatory offence. In this world, where NFTs aren't regulated products, simply buying from yourself to inflate the price is buying from yourself. There is no regulatory breach, there is no criminal offence. It's more of a risk indicator of what may occur in the future. So I'm just wondering how you view that, because you've obviously invested quite a bit of time and effort in identifying these wash trades.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, again, that's an open regulatory question. I'm not a lawyer. However, what we can do and sort of what we do here at Chainalysis is parse through what information is available. So we can look at the blockchain and, again, see these patterns, see the record of these transactions on chain and say, great, we've identified some wash trading here. Has this actor made money? Have they lost money? And if so, if it's law enforcement asking, what exchanges are they connected to that might be able to link this on-chain identity with a real-world identity? So sorry, I'll punt a little on the question there, but.
And this is for Project Ryan. Great question, but I'd offer two use cases. First is, I was talking recently with an NFT trading fund, and they find that very valuable because it gives them insights in whether or not to buy that NFT if there's been a lot of self-funding, because they'd be buying at a price point that's fake. So that's the first thing, although not criminal in nature, very important for the commercial use case. The second use case, also very important, where people create fake losses. I've had people come to me recently and say, I'm selling an NFT between two wallets, and I'm claiming fake losses. And that's advertised on Twitter. Now, for the IRS use case is to see someone generating fake losses and investigating them. So to your point, it has both commercial use cases, tremendously valuable, as well as for IRS enforcement.
Awesome. Thanks, Roger.
Yeah, my question is going to be short. Do you have any option to find how many NFTs have some person? For example, I would like to know how many NFTs someone have.
How many NFTs are in a given wallet?
Somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that, again, NFTs fundamentally, as we walk through, feel free to chime in.
No, please.
Take the stage. But it's a data point on the blockchain, right? A nice way to think about an NFT contract is actually a database keeping track of, okay, token number 0 is at address A, token number 1 is at address B. And what we can do is look at the blockchain, look at that data, and say, great, address A is holding these 5 different NFTs, or in the past has held these 3 NFTs and still has these 2. So that's all information that's available on chain if we're talking about non-custodial wallets. It gets a little bit more nuanced when we talk about some custodial marketplaces like Nifty Market.
And some of the, just to double click on that, some of the blockchains which are used to implement NFT projects allow you to look at, based on a single account or an address, what are the NFTs that you have received. And that can also help you understand all of the different NFTs that you've purchased or you're being transferred. Like, for example, the picture there that shows you the fact that this particular account received a bunch of NBA Top Shot, which is an NFT that this particular account now holds. Unless you see a transfer out from that account into some other account.
Gentlemen, great presentation. Joseph, you saw BitBuy. It's great you're showing the chart there, but I guess the question, and it's really more of a follow-up to that, is a lot of clients, when we're looking at the chain, they'll have multiple NFTs from multiple platforms. And in order for us to understand the full holistic picture of that client or that wallet or that address, we have to go to Explorer, Explorer, Explorer. Is there any intent going forward with the Chainalysis tool to look at consolidating all those different views into one, so that it's sort of like the clustering technology, but more in the ability to look at it instead of having to go to Explorer, Explorer, Explorer to figure all that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point, and definitely, that was a big theme from this morning, was we're headed towards this multi-chain world where one user makes, conducts transactions on many different blockchains. Storyline is one potential to sort of address that, looking more at the transaction level, but seeing all those different transactions across chain in one view. In terms of clustering addresses together, that gets a little bit more nuanced, so maybe we can have a discussion on the side in terms of when we can be sure that they're controlled by the same entity and when not. But I would say in general, Chainalysis, as you saw this morning, is headed towards that multi-chain vision. It's just a matter of building products that really fuse that information in a user-friendly manner. Oh yeah.
Great presentation, guys. The approval attacks are really interesting. Is it accurate to say that they're creating their own smart contracts, like malicious smart contracts, or are they obtaining them and reconfiguring them?
Yeah, so there's actually nothing malicious going on at the smart contract level there. The approval function is built into pretty much every NFT contract. It's a key functionality of the NFT contract, actually. What they're doing is convincing the user to give the approval to someone that they shouldn't give the approval to. As a user, it's perfectly safe for me to give the approval to OpenSea's smart contract to move my NFT for me. I have to do that in order to sell it there. I'm oversimplifying a bit. But it's really dangerous for me to give it to Anand because essentially that gives Anand the power to move my NFT for me. And that's basically what the attackers do there. Great.
Yusuf.
And sorry, Yusuf, did you want to chime in on the last point there? I'll hand it over to the multi-chain expert here.
So on the NFT question, so obviously we are working on Storyline, and one of the things that we want to do for Storyline, and I don't know when it's going to happen, but we are definitely thinking about this. I don't know who asked the NFT question, by the way. So one of the things we are trying to do is we are building something called the portfolio service. And the idea behind the portfolio service is when you look at a wallet, you see all of its holdings in terms of tokens, NFTs, whatever it is. In addition to that, you also see its total wealth. By total wealth, what we mean is basically if it has added any liquidity into a liquidity pool, that stuff doesn't sit in the wallet. So it's a position that the wallet has with a DEX. So we will include all of that stuff too. But it will take us some time to build those, but they are definitely on the roadmap for the next couple of quarters. So it's not only about visualizing the different transactions, but it's also understanding the full picture of a given wallet across different chains. It's definitely in the roadmap.
Awesome. Thanks, Yusuf.
Two more questions.
Hi. So 2 questions actually real quick on the approval part, I guess from a legal aspect. Technically, people are agreeing on it, right? Like they are approving and signing. So I don't know, I mean, probably you can answer that in a direct way, but in what way is it, can it be labeled as illegal activity if somebody actually signs it? And the second question would be, let's say one person puts an NFT on OpenSea for 1 ETH, but doesn't cancel the transaction, moves the NFT to a different wallet, and then the NFT goes up by, let's say, 10 ETH, and then by the time they transfer it back, it's being sold for 1 ETH. But it's a regular transaction, so how would you categorize that?
I can take the first part. I'm actually a lawyer in my previous life. Basically, that would be what's called fraud on the inducement, where basically there's a legal standard where if you are tricking someone into doing something, right, without their knowledge, it's a type of fraud, and each state would have different criminal laws around it because in the US each state has different laws. But there is a criminal precedence there that if you are tricking someone into agreeing to do something, it's invalid. It's contractually invalid. You
Yeah.
can probably take the second part.
And yeah, to the second part of, can someone, is that one way of stealing NFTs? There's a few cases in particular where people actually sort of, it was a more technically sophisticated attack where they were able to go back and basically execute on-chain orders that had not been canceled. I would say that's probably not as common though, especially just in comparison to the ease of convincing someone to give you their private key, convincing someone to click a button that they shouldn't. Those more complex attacks of looking through on-chain orders and trying to find stuff below market price, it's harder for the attacker and it's not something we see as much.
We're going take one more question. Gentleman over here.
Hey guys, thank you again for the presentation today. Additional question regarding the risk rating that you apply within your platform for either stolen NFTs, those that have been identified for wash trading, and I'm thinking specifically for the NFT or the collection, if that's inflating the price overall, as well as the potential wallets who are purporting those type of activities.
Gotcha. Yeah, oftentimes, I mean, we do occasionally see wash traders create their own NFTs, but more frequently, maybe they use an existing NFT contract, and this is the same one that we see for launderers. They're not necessarily, creating their own NFT collection that could be labeled as, this is a high-risk collection. They're using existing collections and just doing illicit things with that perfectly legitimate technology. So rather, our focus on risk there would be at the address level, at the externally owned account level of the account, the address that is doing the bad thing, rather than the entire NFT collection. Hope that helps. We can chat after too, yeah. Awesome.
Great, thanks. And that wraps up this session for today. Please thank our speakers, and if anyone has any additional questions, they'll be available for a few more minutes.